Let us commence this module by discussing about the free market system. The classical economists were proponents of laissez-faire, a government-free market system. They advocated limited government intervention and believed in the existence of an invisible hand that would restore full employment in the economy. However, the Great Depression of 1930s exposed the loopholes and vulnerabilities associated with the price mechanism and the market system. The period of 1920 to 30s saw the rise of Keynesian economic theory that forcefully argued in favor of the government intervention in the economic activities. It argued that fiscal policy can generate employment and can maintain it at high levels too. There was a growing concern for greater equity via income distribution. The subsequent period saw the expansion of government role in social and economic activities across countries. Moreover, the rise of command economies of the Soviet Union and the Eastern European economies created pressure for a larger government role in social economic affairs. Various intellectuals saw virtues in these upcoming economic system, and the market-oriented economies such as US gradually moved toward a mixed economy system with increasing government expenditures. The term mixed economy was introduced to describe an economic system that matched the characteristics of the pure market and the planned economy, forming a mix of competitive and non-competitive mechanism of creation, distribution and application of national resources. The whole theory of mixed economy has been established as the growth of the role of the government and the creation of public sector in a capitalist economy. After studying this module, you shall be able to understand the concept of mixed economy, understand the role performed by the government in the mixed economy system. Let us understand the concept of mixed economy. The Great Depression sowed the seeds of the government participation in economic activities. It exposed the problems associated with market system and called for active government participation, as in Keynes' view, the public was not satisfied with the private sector. Keynes called for fiscal measures to spur up the investment and demand in the economy. He argued that public spending on social and economic infrastructure can provide the necessary boost to the economy and raise the effective demand, and thus can be instrumental in economic growth. In preceding years, there was a growing consensus among the policy makers that markets can fail and government has all the required expertise, knowledge and resources that can correct the market failure. Apart from protecting the nation, it can arrest the growing inequalities, can curb the poverty, generate employment, raise investment and stabilize the economy. Economists came to believe that higher level of public spending can compensate for the lack of private investment and can make the economy recession proof. Apart from economic developments, political developments also played a part in the growing government presence. Both socialist and fascist ideologies arising from the Soviet Union and Eastern European nations pushed for an overwhelming role of the government in allocation of resources and income distribution. The increasing popularity of the government's action contributed to the rise of public spending in market-oriented economies such as the US, Canada, United Kingdoms and Australia. Thus, the period of 1950s and 60s saw a rise of market economies or welfare states in some countries and marked the end of laissez-faire. In the US, the public expenditure as a percentage of GDP rose from 9.9% in 1929 to 28.4% in 1958. Thus, a mixed economic system is one in which both the public and the private sector play an important role. The two sectors coordinate with each other in the decision-making process, covering the economic activities in general and resource allocation in particular. Schoenfield 1984 describes a mixed economy as a mixed economy is one in which prices and supplies of goods and services are largely determined by market processes. At the same time, the state and its agencies have a large capacity for economic intervention, which is used in an endeavor to secure objectives that the market would, it is believed, not achieved automatically or not fast enough to meet the requirement of the public policy. In simple terms, it is a system where market forces and government regulation simultaneously operate in sphere of production, consumption and distribution. Before discussing further, it is essential to distinguish between institutions classified as the government from the private ones. The individuals running the government institutions are elected through a voting process or are appointed by the ones elected, whereas the individuals running a private institution are chosen by the shareholders or are self-nominated. They lack the right of compulsion which a government is endowed with. The government can force its citizens to pay taxes, can seize the properties and restrict production and so on, whereas all private exchanges are voluntary. As we know, the public and private sector are the vital elements of a mixed economy. Coordination between the two determines the success of economy. The public sector is composed of enterprises which are owned and controlled by the government. Such entity includes institutions such as hospitals, government-run schools, state offices, defense, local and state government management and their departments, etc. They engage in the production, delivery and allocation of goods and services by and for the government or its citizens, whether national, regional or local or municipal, with the aim of maximizing social welfare. On the other hand, the private sector is composed of the private organizations that are not owned and controlled by the government and run for the private profits. All small businesses, corporations, profit and non-profit organizations, etc. constitute the private sector. Now, we will look at the role of the government in a mixed economy. Markets are not able to achieve economic efficiency in all economic activities all the time. There is some dissatisfaction with the way markets operate. Such problems are classified as market failures, the inability of markets to achieve Pareto optimal allocation or outcomes. Weaknesses associated with the market system. Failure of competition, where a single or few firms dominate markets, can result in undesirable consequences such as higher prices, less than socially optimal output, fewer choices and compromise on quality, etc. Next, another weakness associated with market economy is that it cannot protect individuals such as the elderly, disabled who lack adequate ability, knowledge and are less informed to make informed rational decisions. Information required to assess the products can be costly, technical and time consuming to acquire and evaluate. For example, there is a lack of an organized system to ensure that products offered for sale are genuine and safe, such as chemicals. Next, the externalities associated with production and consumption activities of individuals can result in significant cost for the third parties. The profit-driven and cost-minimizing efforts of businesses can lead to significant external cost for society. For example, environmental degradation caused due to the power plant in a locality. Next, market failures are also an outcome of age, gender and race discrimination of workers, resulting in unequal treatment and inefficient use of labor resources. A market economy left to operate itself can lead to inequality in income distribution on one hand and promote monopolistic tendencies on the other hand. Moreover, such economies are prone to widespread economic fluctuations unless regulated. Growing industrialization and urbanization with large benefits brings with them a host of economic and social problems and builds pressures on scarce economic resources. The problems associated with the provision of health, education, housing, social security and other social economic infrastructure are counterparts of rapid industrialization. Economic development also calls for the development of other sectors such as agriculture. Very often, a market economy system, especially in an underdeveloped country, neglects the growth of its agriculture and other indigenous sectors. Such problems can be effectively tackled only through the intervention of local and state government agencies. Another factor which distinguishes a mixed economy from market economy is the incorporation of planning in the development process. Planning is important in the case of underdeveloped and developing economies suffering from the lack of productive investment and infrastructure. Most part of the savings is channelized into unproductive activities such as jewelry and real estate. Hence, the public sector can act as a catalyst in mobilizing such savings into productive uses. Thus, the government intervention is required to address an economy's market failure and to compensate for the lack of private sector initiatives. With government intervention, an economy moves from the status of a pure market economy to mixed economy. Government alters the private sector behavior through the legal system and regulations, taxes and subsidies, through lending activity and through publicly provided activity. The government influences the decision making process through some general ways such as establishment of a legal framework, property rights, contracts, court procedures and other matters guide how businesses and households operate. Government regulation. The government intervenes in the business decision through regulations on pricing, profit and other managerial decisions to address the problems such as pollution, availability, product safety, etc. The government intervenes in the labor market to ensure workers' rights and protect their interest. The revenues and expenditure policies of the government impact the economic activities of a country. These policies exert significant influence on employment and inflation condition. For example, an expansionary fiscal policy during the period of an economic downturn can help boost the aggregate demand and employment in an economy. The expenditure policies also have a direct impact on certain industries and markets such as defense. The government also engages in social security programs such as income and employment support programs. Such programs help to improve the employment and earning potential of individuals and boost the supply of skilled labor force. Overall, as pointed out by Schoenfield, 1965, there are 5 aspects of government's role in a mixed economy, which are as follows. Government's influence on the management of economic system has vastly increased. This operates differently among countries. In some countries, the banking system plays a decisive role, whereas in some other countries, public enterprises exert an important influence on the economic activities. Second, increasing public expenditure is incurred on public welfare or in Keynesian demand management. Third, government's regulatory measures such as property rights, quotas, contracts, etc. regulate the market functioning and encouragement of long-range collaboration between firms. Fourth, government economic policy includes an active industrial policy to promote the small-scale industries, promote research and development, boost exports and the training of workers. And finally, governments are open to long-range national planning both in the public and in the private sector. Government intervention in a mixed economy can be illustrated through the following examples. In the input market, through anti-discrimination laws, wage legislations, laws relating to bargaining. In the output market, through direct provision of certain goods and services, that is, public and merit goods, purchase of goods and services, consumer protection laws, tariffs, subsidies and quotas on domestic and international trade, etc. In the business sector, through public utility regulations, monopolistic restrictions, corporate income taxes, etc. In the household sector, through inheritance laws, personal income taxes, transfer payments, welfare schemes, etc. There is no doubt that price mechanism cannot assure microeconomic efficiency and has often led to high unemployment and economic instability. Hence, government intervention has become an important component for correcting the market failure and for ensuring the economic stability. It can supplement the private sector and act as an agent of economic development. The public sector assumes even more importance in underdeveloped and developing economies that lack adequate resources, suffer from widespread poverty and unemployment. And following are some important features that highlight the role of government in a mixed economy. First, the simultaneous existence of and coordination between the public and the private sectors. Second, allocation of resources through the price mechanism and government directives. Third, protection of consumers' choice and their sovereignty. Fourth, the arrangement of definite economic planning for the public sector enterprises. And fifth, the government intervenes and regulates profits of the private sector. Sixth, promotion and ensuring social welfare of the citizens. Seventh, implementing the effective fiscal policy and monetary policy conducive to economic development. Eighth, encouraging technological progress to promote efficiency in the economy. The government participates in a mixed economy through various measures such as direct participation, regulatory or indirect measures, direct physical controls. Now, we shall look into the role of government in underdeveloped economies. Government intervention in the form of public sector activities is inevitable in case of underdeveloped countries that suffer from economic rigidities and a vicious circle of poverty and underdevelopment, and where the market failure may be even more severe. This vicious circle can be broken through comprehensive government planning. The process of economic development is held up in the early stages due to the lack of economic and social infrastructure such as health facilities, education, highways, telecom, etc. in underdeveloped countries. Provision of such social overheads will create external economies for expansion of the private sector. However, there is a lack of private initiative in the provision of such overheads because it requires huge capital outlays, long gestation period and low and uncertain returns. Moreover, return accrues in the form of say high standards of education, an organized transportation network, etc., which accrue the society as a whole rather than to individually to a private investor who undertook investment in the creation of such infrastructure. Hence, private investors find such expenditures not highly profitable, and as a result there is a lack of private investment in such areas. The private sector lacks the capacity and necessary approach for undertaking such development initiatives. This necessitates direct government intervention. The government can raise the necessary resources for building such infrastructure through modes of taxation, public debt and deficit financing. Another area where underdeveloped countries suffer is the lack of resources and adequate skills. The markets, as we know, cannot allocate all resources efficiently all the time. They suffer from both incentive and information constraints. Thus, the government through planning and scheme of priorities can lead to efficient allocation of scarce resources. Besides, the private sector in these countries lack attention to the long run problems and objectives of the economy and rather concentrates on short term profit objectives, are unprepared and reluctant to invest in social projects, suffer from uncoordinated economic decisions among various sectors of the economy. Let us now know the importance of the public sector. The problems associated with the functioning of the price mechanism are a strong rationale for the growth of the public sector. An efficient and effective coordination between the public and the private sector is an imperative requirement for the development process. The public sector has three important roles to play. Compensatory or substitutive role. The need for public sector arises when there is a need to compensate for the deficiency of the market system. It can substitute for the private sector and perform corrective, productive and distributive activities and at the same time ensure efficient utilization of scarce resources. For example, the power sector, exclusively in the hands of the private sector, is prone to monopolistic tendencies or externalities. The control of government through regulations over the power sector is the remedy for such situation. The public sector also makes up for the deficiencies of market system in the achievement of socially desirable objectives such as those concerning health and education. The private provision of such services has been often inadequate and inequitably distributed. The adjunctive role. The public sector plays an adjunctive role in the provision of public and merit goods. The market fails in the assessment of true preferences of the individuals for goods satisfying social wants and thus does not provide such goods. The competitive role. The public sector plays a competitive role in the provision of merit goods in order to keep the private sector's monopolistic tendencies in check. The government either directly provides these goods or subsidizes the private sector provisions of these goods. Overall, the success of all these governmental efforts depend upon the administrative competence of the government. It should aim for an environment conducive to the efficient functioning and coordination between various players of the market system. Creation of a right incentive and information structure for the private sector will attract the right amount and quality of private investment. In poor economies, it should take care of the crucial activities such as health, education and infrastructure and ought to be active in the fields of social security and at the same time should refrain from the activities where the market system is already efficient. Let us now summarize what we have discussed in this module. The market is a system that coordinates the production and consumption of goods and services through a price mechanism. The government is an organization that uses coercive forces to coordinate people's activities according to set rules and regulations. It takes the responsibility for the provision of goods and services that cannot be provided by the markets such as public goods, social security, etc. The Great Depression saw the rise of government spending on economic and social activities. The Keynesian school of thought advocated a greater role of the government in economic activities and pushed for greater fiscal measure for promoting the economic growth. Thus, gradually market economies such as US moved to a mixed economic system with a greater role of the government. Government intervention in a market economy is required to improve the microeconomic efficiency by correcting a market failure. A mixed economy is a system where market forces and government regulations simultaneously operate in the sphere of production, consumption and distribution. The public and the private sectors coordinate with each other in decision making process covering the economic activities in general and resource allocation in particular. The government participates in a mixed economy through various measures such as direct participation, regulatory or indirect measures, and direct physical controls. The public sector is composed of enterprises which are owned and controlled by the government. Such entity includes institutions such as hospitals, government-run schools, state offices, defense, local and state government management and their departments, etc. They engage in the production, delivery and allocation of goods and services by and for the government or its citizens, whether national, regional or local or municipal, with the aim of maximizing social welfare. The private sector is composed of private organizations that are not owned and controlled by the government and are run for the private profits. All small businesses, corporations, profit and non-profit organizations, etc. constitute the private sector.